Again, welcome back to Vital Conversations, which is a time where we are bringing in some awesome resources to the Mountain Sky to talk through some areas of ministry, not only with the COVID-19 stuff, but also just in general how we can focus on vitality. And we are really, really blessed today to have the Reverend Rachel Gilmore be our conversation partner. Rachel and I met while we were attending Asbury College, now Asbury University, and we were rock and roll stars at Asbury together. So lots of fun and good memories from college together. But after that, she went to Duke, graduated in 2009, and was appointed to plant a church in Virginia Beach. It's called The Gathering at Scott Memorial UMC. She began with 10 young adults, and that church grew to over 400 people regularly involved in the life of that church. She's also planted 2 missional preschools, which have provided over $250,000 in scholarships to families in need in their community. And in July 2019, she became the Director of Recruiting, Assessing, and Training for Community Engagement and Church Planting for Path 1 Discipleship Ministries based in Nashville, Tennessee, which is sort of our General Board of Discipleship. Path 1 is part of our United Methodist Connection. In addition to leading workshops and conferences around the U.S., she's been a recent contributor to 4 books on church planting, recently launched a podcast called Field Preachers, which can be found on iTunes and SoundCloud. Make sure you check that out. And Path 1 specifically, right, at Discipleship Ministries is about helping churches find innovative ways to engage their community to start new expressions of faith. They actually just produced a relaunch curriculum, which is going to help churches see this season of social distancing as a way to strategically prepare their church to relaunch in new ways. So Rachel's going to talk through this tool, share some ideas about how to adapt during this time to reach new people and to sustain our current congregations. So that's just a little bit of an intro to what we're hoping to do today. So Rachel, welcome. You have quite the job title. What a cool thing that you do with Path 1. We're so glad to have you here and want to welcome you to Vital Conversations. How you doing? Let's get started. Jump right in.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, it's a long title, but they call me affectionately the Rat because I do recruiting, assessment, and training. So it's maybe not as great as it sounds at first glance, but I love it. I love what I'm doing. I love resourcing churches and using my time as a church planter for a decade to connect with other church planters and to help existing churches revitalize their church in its current context. So I'm excited to share this relaunch tool with you. I put the link right in the chat function so you can see what it is we're talking about. This is a tool created by one of my colleagues, Paul Nixon, another church planter coach. He's been on staff with Path 1 for over a decade, but he talked with 2 other prominent coaches and consultants and a planter about seeing this as a season of relaunch. So in church planting, for those of you who may not have done that or experienced that before, we have 7 general seasons. You start with discerning and then visioning, and the 3rd season is gathering. It's where you start to really meet people and you prepare for launching worship. So that's that next stage is when you really get going. And so what we've realized from the planting community is all of you are church planters. Congratulations. I can type up a little certificate for you because during the season when restrictions are lifted and we head back to church in some form or fashion, it's going to be different, right? It has to be different. And we don't know how long that might last, but we can use some of these principles that were developed, over the last decade in the church planting community to help you figure out what it means to relaunch worship in your own context. All right, so let me share the PowerPoint I put together. I'm a visual person. Can y'all see that? So what I just talk about this relaunch tool that you could just look at your own leisure, it might not be as helpful. So what I'll be doing through our time together is sharing the 3 main sections of the relaunch curriculum that Paul put together with that team, but also incorporate ideas and innovations from church planters. So I meet once a week with church planters across the United States to hear how they're applying these 3 principles right now and how they're envisioning doing it moving forward. So I thought I'd share a bunch of those ideas with you so that you could say, okay, this will work in my context, or this would never work. And that's, that's fine. We'll try to experience that together. Oh, thank you guys. I'm trying to pull up chat here too as I'm doing everything else. Okay, let me move the chat function to the side so I can move on. So I know that for a lot of our congregations, what I've been hearing in my conversations with pastors, the congregations are just longing to go back to the way things were before COVID-19. And while that's understandable, this is a great opportunity for the church to say, you know what, if we've started doing online ministry or connecting with new people in virtual spaces, we don't want to go back to the way things were, right? We need to use this as a chance to really move forward and innovate. So what does that look like? There are three main sections that the Relaunch tool will help you look at. And the first talks about building relationships. So questions to ask yourself and your core team are, who are we reaching right now? How are we reaching them? How are we staying connected to them? And how can we meet new people? So maybe you're reaching people online through live streaming if you're in a more rural area with limited, Wi-Fi. Maybe you're reaching people by mailing DVDs of sermons, right? Or sending them letters or calling them and embracing the reality of the phone tree system. But looking at who it is that you're reaching, the methods that you're using and how fruitful they are is hugely important right now. And then also looking at how you're staying connected to them over time, and then really embracing this as an opportunity to meet new people and bring new people into a faith community. I was just talking with a church planter in New Jersey yesterday who was in an online meetup group, which, meetup.com, for those of you who don't know, it's not a religious platform necessarily. It's people that like to hike or read books or drink wine that gather together, and they're meeting online right now because of COVID-19. And he was just in a random secular group, and some of the millennials in there were saying, wow, we never realized until now that we have no spiritual or emotional tools to deal with this. And we really wish we knew where to go. And Brendan was able to say, well, let me introduce myself. I happen to be a church planter, and I would love to connect and support you during this time. So meeting new people is huge right now because folks are really craving a deeper connection or more resources for processing this season. Okay, so when it comes to building relationships, I'm going to talk about some of the main ways that we're doing this right now. Connecting with online guests in worship is huge, right? Folks across the board are seeing more and more people viewing their online services, either in watch parties or later throughout the week, watching it after it's been posted on YouTube or Facebook. But how do you know if someone is new? So one of the best connect cards we've seen this is from LaCroix Church in Missouri. And so when you go to their website, you have the chance that a box pops right up that tells about worship times, resources, and also says, would you like to connect with us? And this is the form that is created so that they have a way to plug in right away. So that's one option, is to come up with some kind of form. You can use one like this or a Google form for your online guests. In North Texas, a lot of their churches and church plants are telling folks on Sunday mornings for their stream service, hey, if it's your first time streaming with us, we're so glad you're here, and we would love to get to know you better. So if you're brand new, go to that chat box and just type one word, connect, and someone from our church will reach out to you within 24 hours to get to know you better and figure out how we can support you during this time. So it's a really simple way to just gather their name where they're volunteering the fact that they're a guest. Other churches like the Gathering in St. Louis, Matt Majowski's church, and others are doing a coffee time either before or after worship, where you can log in and Zoom with the pastor or the pastor of discipleship or your ushers and greeters who might be longing to use their gifts right now. And they just meet and visit for those folks that really want more of a dialogue and conversation prior to or following worship. There's a church planter in Maine who has a smaller congregation, so she uses Zoom on Sunday mornings for worship, and she does breakout rooms every Sunday with Zoom, and she spends her time investing in those who are brand new in that breakout room to get to know them better and connect. And then Marty Quick, who's a planter pastor at Journey Church, it's about 12 years old in South Carolina, they have like a set system of social media ambassadors who are hosting all of those watch parties, and it's their job to follow up with anyone that they've invited who's not a part of the faith community, to really welcome them and make sure that they're invited back and into other offerings throughout the week. All right, so any questions at all about the connecting with online guests in worship before I move on to other ways to build relationships? Okay, we'll have a time for questions at the end too, but another way that folks are connecting that's hugely crucial is with discipleship, right? If they're just live streaming on Sunday and that's really the only connection they have to you, chances are that they won't stay connected. So discipleship is crucial. What I am hearing, and you might be experiencing more out west than I am here in Nashville, where, you know, retail stores opened up today again, but folks have been living in Zoom rooms for weeks and weeks already. And so Zoom fatigue is real for them. And churches that have been offering weekly check-ins, you know, just stop in and say hi or have coffee with the pastor every Wednesday at 7, they're seeing their attendance in those Zoom rooms decrease because people are either over Zoom as a platform, or they don't want to think about how they're feeling or if they're anxious or what their prayer requests are. They're just so overwhelmed emotionally that is not, that has not had the same constant numbers as other offerings in churches across the nation. So what folks are finding is that having a book study, you know, for the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about this book, log in, even if you haven't read it, join with us. Or doing content-driven studies, like Amplify is offering their whole covenant discipleship program for free online right now. It's video-based, so they can watch a video when they want. It's a 28-week curriculum that helps you read 75% of the Bible by the time you're done. And it's kind of like an updated disciple thing. So that's been a tool that folks have been using right now in their communities to get people to read on their own and feel like they're really learning or able to study at their own pace when they have the emotional or mental bandwidth to dive in. Other churches are trying, when they offer prayer groups or Bible studies or check-ins throughout the week, sometimes just not using Zoom, but using another platform like Crowdcast has been helpful to people. So Crowdcast, I think it is a nominal fee. They have a nonprofit fee, I believe, but they'll allow you to do what Zoom and others do with the split screen, but it live streams automatically to Facebook or to YouTube, and people who participate are not on the screen in video form, their avatars on the side. So they don't have to worry about anyone seeing that they're in their pajamas or they started drinking or whatever it is. They have more anonymity, and yet the people who are presenting are still there on the screen. And you're able to do polls and questions, multiple choice stuff. So StreamYard is another one. I saw JR mention that, to live stream to Facebook. But so look for other platforms, because sometimes just a different platform can help people feel like it's a different experience for them. When it comes to discipleship, small group leaders, over and over and over again, especially in my discussions with leaders of Fresh Expressions in the United Methodist Church across our connection, are talking about how as pastors, you know, our priority should be really pouring into that small group of leaders, our key leaders, that if we equip them now can start leading all these Zoom rooms, because you guys should not be doing all of this. You should not be doing all the discipleship of the church. But the hope is, and the thought is with a lot of churches, that as restrictions lift, they don't want 100 people to go right back to church the first Sunday that they're permitted to. But these small group leaders who are hosting these online groups every week could host a watch party instead of virtually in their homes. And so you still feel like you have that human connection, but it's at safer numbers of 6 to 8 or no more than 10 people, so that you can really build on that and make them neighborhood based. So I'll talk a little bit later in terms of meeting new people. Some planters and pastors are starting neighborhood groups where people can share what they need or joys or concerns or what they're selling or whatever. But their hope is that by hosting those groups, those could potentially become house churches as things shift and we try to experience church in smaller groups, at least initially. And then move Fresh Expressions. If any of you are doing Fresh Expressions right now, try to move them online when you can. What I'm hearing from some of our dinner church networks is that if you have a dinner church, it's been hard for some folks to really make that an engaging environment. But there are other types of Fresh Expressions that are doing really well online. So I think I mentioned this example later, but I'll throw it in now. There's a church planter in Virginia who hosts a wine tasting, and everyone gets the wine sent from the winery, and then they'll drink it together and do a Bible study on vineyards or vines together. And so that's a fresh expression group that's translated well to an online platform, and it supports local businesses, engages in discipleship. So, so try that as well. How do you meet new people though, outside of worship? So outside of Sunday mornings, what can we be doing to really grow the church? Not for the sake of the church, but for the sake of people who feel really alone right now and never realized until this moment how hungry they are for community, meaningful community. There are two ways to do this. You find third spaces or you create third spaces. So third space is like a fresh expressions planter term that describes, okay, your first place is your home. That's where you live. Your next place is work, where you spend your time. And then a third place is anywhere else that you go throughout the course of a day. So third spaces prior to COVID-19 were gyms, YMCA, restaurants, breweries, golf courses, mommy play groups, you know, you name it. Where are people gathering? Right now, they're all online, right? So how do you find people in these third places? A lot of pastors and planters throughout the connection have been using like Tabletopia. If you like online gaming, board games, I mean, not like gambling stuff, but just playing board games with people. You can go to Tabletopia and meet brand new people you've never met. Or if you're into Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know what that is other than the name, but some people are avid fans, and that's amazing. May God be with you, because D&D people are really growing the church on Roll20, and they'll ask, you know, to play Dungeons and Dragons with other people that live in their community, so that when restrictions are lifted, they can gather in person and be like, yeah, I am a pastor, but I'm cool, right? And so they're making that connection. House Party is one that, gosh, live with Kelly and Ryan Seacrest, they were just talking about it last week, the benefits of that. And this has been fun for kids ministry too, because you can play games as families with other people from the church. And the beauty of House Party is if my 8 and 11-year-old want to play a game with a family from school, then anyone that family knows can be invited in to our video chat room. So I'm able to meet up to 6 new people outside of my one contact every time I go to a house party. Other people that have been doing joint working spaces and have Slack channels outside of like a church channel have been using Slack. It's like an online communication platform as a way of meeting new people. Or there are lots of mom groups, gyms, meetups that are online, and you can go to those spaces to create new relationships. And then you can make your own. So I mentioned the Facebook has really been taking off with pastors and planters. If their neighborhood doesn't have a Facebook group, creating one. There's one planter in Florida who started one that now 1,000 people have joined. It was based on zip code, and now they're basing it on neighborhood. And it's really helped people connect to those that live right next door to them. So you can also do Facebook live events. There are some pastors live streaming yoga lessons, meditation lessons. And that's a way to create a third space where if it's done regularly, the same people can come and gather and chat and connect with each other. Other pastors, there's a planter in North Georgia who hosts a Zoom call every other Wednesday called Crucial Conversations, similar to your theme here, but they'll have a financial advisor come on and talk about budgeting. And they advertise it on Eventbrite and Meetup in secular areas, and there's secular themes. You know, what does anxiety look like right now? How do we stay healthy right now? And yet a church is hosting and sponsoring it. So they're making that connection. They're creating a third space for people to gather. You can partner with local businesses like that planter I mentioned in Virginia is doing with the winery. And House Party, you can be the one hosting them as opposed to friending in to other people's game parties through that app. Okay. And I see a question up on chat. Sorry, I'll tackle that and then move on. So as we reach more people online, some will want to become members. If they live so far away, they won't ever come to our church building. Should you put them on your rolls? What if they live in another conference? What a great question. I'm going to direct you to your DS and your bishop on that. I can say that conversations I'm hearing across the connection are that so many people are connecting online and virtually that they anticipate, even when all restrictions are lifted, they will continue to have an online stream service and the same online Bible study that their virtual members can consistently be a part of. I know in my own experience, so I was in Virginia Beach, that's where I planted, and there's the highest concentration of military personnel in Hampton Roads compared to anywhere in the world. So we were in a very transient community, military moving in and out all the time. And we had a couple at our church who became members, and then they got orders to Japan. And Japan's exciting, but when you're like a same-sex couple on a small island in Japan, there are not a lot of churches where you can plug in. And so they would join our live stream every Sunday evenings. We did Zoom room Bible studies that they were a part of. They still contributed financially via our eGive opportunities. And when we had mission events, like we hosted a baby shower for a woman getting out of jail, they used Amazon and they mailed all their baby gifts. And in my mind, they were more active members than some people who showed up every Sunday but didn't engage outside of that hour. So so they stayed on our rolls, and now they live in New York, and they still stream on, like, that is their faith community. And I talked to local Methodist pastors to get them into a physical small group there as well, if possible. But the gathering has just always been their church home. So they go there at Christmas to worship in person with their family. So navigate those waters in your own particular context, but I would say be very open to having folks become a vibrant part of your faith community who may never ever physically walk through your doors. Okay.
Rachel, I think part of the conversation that you just named too, which I think is important to consider with Mike's question, is really that word engagement that you named. And so there's a lot of different things for us to consider in this time, but the deep work that we need to do is to think through this shifting of, and we've kind of been trying to do this in a lot of spaces, the shifting from attendance into engagement. So really in this more digital world, beginning to do the deeper work of, we've gotten X amount of views, we've gotten X amount of hits or watches, but if you don't do that, deeper background, how are we going to really engage people even in this digital platform, just in the same way that you would think about physical engagement with your physical community of membership. So if you're going to do a new member class, thinking around what are the things that are going to engage people in mission, in ministry, into the life of this community, not just physically, but now also virtually. I think some of those same principles can translate, but leaning into that word which you named about engagement. I think about the building relationships you talked about. And then also, that's part of what I don't think we do sometimes as pastors or as church leaders is doing that, hitting that pause button and then thinking about everything that's behind it, the systems behind it, the principles behind it. And for me, the word I just highlighted is engagement. What's the engagement strategy?
Exactly. I completely agree. And you might be surprised at the response that you get from unexpected groups of people. I was talking to a pastor in Wisconsin who has found a way to use Venmo for online giving because she serves, younger teens and young adults that just don't use anything else. And she's having like 15 and 16-year-olds every Sunday live stream, and they're Venmoing the church like $5. And she's like, it's maybe not enough to pay all our bills, but the fact that a 15-year-old kid is like, that's sacrifice, that's discipleship, that's engagement in ways that you don't always see. So I completely agree. Rethink what it means to be a part of the faith community. My gosh, we keep some people on our rolls for years and years and years who just became members so they could get a grandkid baptized and then left for 20 years, right? So like, how do we re-engage them too and use this as an opportunity to reconnect and help them live into their membership vows as well? So, sorry, I'm not like politically correct. I'm a church planter. So if I say anything offensive, my apologies in advance, but I'm Italian, so we just say what we think. So
you go, Rachel, you do you. Let's do this.
Thank you, Michael. Yay. Okay, so the next section, after you think about how are we building relationships, this is an amazing and incredible opportunity for all of us to be planning our relaunch.
Hold on, can we pause? Sorry,
Yep.
Rachel. Sorry.
Sure.
I don't want to leave the building relationships piece without I got a follow-up question. And before we go into section 2, I want to open it up again for anybody that can do something. But Rachel, what you shared about within the principles of building relationships, I think is just so important for us to remember and to lean into. And I want you to speak to the fact that, this is what I feel sometimes in local churches, and maybe the tension of pastoral ministry. I'm speaking from like a clergy person perspective right now. And I know we got laity on the call, so I'd love to hear some of their perspective too. Sometimes as a pastor, I feel like, and I'm sure maybe there's other pastors that feel the same way, the demands of the role of the pastoral office is expectations are on the people that are already there. Like so much of my time or our time is going to be taking care of the people that are currently there. And really what you just spent great resourcing on is the idea of, hey, we're supposed to be building new relationships too. And can you speak to that? Coming from a church planner perspective, this kind of makes sense to you. But how do you speak more about that tension about the call of building new relationships?
Oh yeah, this is huge. And in talking to pastors, they're like, why do I feel like I'm technically doing less and yet I'm more tired than ever before, right? And I think they just have all these demands from people in that local church. And if everyone discerns their call in different ways, right? And everyone lives into their call in different ways. But I think one thing that more established church pastors can learn from church planters is that, without relationships and new relationships, this faith community is not going to be sustainable. And you want people to be able to learn and to teach each other and to engage in intergenerational relationships. And it can be a beautiful and powerful thing. But what that means is that as a pastor, I have to make relationships my priority. So you might not be able to tell, I'm like a functional introvert. So relationships can exhaust me, and yet I know they're essential to the kingdom of God. So I schedule in time, when I was a planter, the goal is, just to really freak you out, to meet 40 new people every single month and get some form of phone number, email, whatever from them. So, that's, if you do that, then you guys are official church planters. And it's easier to do now in the virtual season than it might have been prior. But then once you make that initial connection, this is what I think is crucial for pastors so we don't burn out. We need new people, and they're a beautiful gift. But if we are the only meaningful connection they have to the faith community, then it cheats them and it cheats the church. So as quickly as possible, and there are churches all over the US right now, Methodist churches who are just blowing it out of the water. They're finding these online guests through that Connect card. And within a week, they've helped that brand new person meet 2 to 3 other people in the church. So your goal is 4 to 6 people. When a new person knows 4 to 6 other people by name and knows something about them, where they work or what their job is, they are much more likely to maintain a relationship and stay engaged and go deeper in that faith community. So, what I would do as a planter is I would do potluck with the pastor once a month, where anyone who is new could come and hear about the church. And I made sure 60% of those invited were brand new people. And the other 40% were my key leaders who were in their affinity group. I'd play like matchmaker, and so that they could get to know other people that they had things in common with. And you can do that virtually as well. You can do that on Zoom. You can do that on House Party as you're helping people make those other meaningful relationships. Or, Crowdcast. I found that guys liked Crowdcast better because of the whole avatar thing, but so some of the women like the Zoom so they could feel like they're really seeing each other. But yeah, so connect. So, and that's where I said really pour into your key leaders right now. Like if you took the next 4 weeks to email, there are a few methods for doing this, but there's a guy named Ralph Moore. One guy, I think he's like with Foursquare, but over the last 30 years, 2,500 churches trace their existence to his mentorship of pastors or laity in the church. So, I mean, my gosh, if 30 years from now, I could say 2,500 churches existed because I poured into relationships, I mean, that's meaningful ministry, right? So, and what he would do, and what you guys could do if you want to follow the Ralph Moore paradigm, it's kind of a Jesus one, so Ralph can't claim that he created this. Ralph would pick 3 people the same way Jesus had his core team of 3, and he would spend a year with them. And in that year, it would be 1 hour every week for a year. So you could just say, if this is new for you, ask those 3 key leaders who are the strongest, healthiest, most gifted leaders in your church to spend an hour a week with you by invite only. They might be really honored by that. And he would ask them the same 3 questions. He would say, what did you hear in our online worship service that felt like God was talking to you? And then the next question would be, why do you think God was telling you that? And the third question would be, what are you going to do about that in the next 24 hours? So that his laity were learning how to hear the voice of God for themselves, interpret and apply it to their own life, and then respond with obedience. And he found that doing that and pouring into laity in that way, with that intentionality, was huge. And that within 6 months to a year, those laity were ready to start their own groups of 3 people, who then expanded, who then became leaders in the church. So absolutely build those relationships, but don't make it a wheel where you're that central hub and you're keeping everything together, because that's not sustainable for you. I mean, I care about you guys and your mental and physical and emotional health. But pour into others who can then pass that on. And then after you mentor those original 3 people and send them out, then you become the coach, right? For those 3 who are, and continue to coach others as it grows. And a paradigm for what those coaching check-ins look like is once a month. This comes from the book Exponential by the Ferguson brothers. So once a month you do a Zoom call and you ask them how they're doing with the RPMs, relationally, physically, mentally, spiritually. How are you? And that helps you know where to encourage and support them if they need to step back for a while. Maybe now they're sick or they're grieving or they lost their job. And so it's not the time for them to stay in that leadership position. But yes, discipleship is key and crucial. And this is a time to really focus on that, to meet new people and disciple them.
It's so much of our language in Vitality is the language of improvement. And I think we need to shift the improvement language into multiplication language.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rachel, keep going. I just want to make sure we get through the presentation on time and leave some time for questions. Folks, if you got questions, put them in the chat box, and that way we won't miss it. So, and it may be something relevant that Rachel's going to be riffing on right now. So we don't want to lose your comments or questions. Keep putting them in the chat box. But just for the sake of time, I want to make sure we get through some of this. Go ahead, Rachel. Let's do some planning of our relaunch.
Great. So section 1 was the most content driven. So these should be quicker because we're not quite here yet, right? Section 2, you might be starting on now where you're planning your relaunch, but section 3 will come much later depending on what COVID is like in your community. So plan your relaunch right now. So form a team to create a flexible plan, right? Because from week to week, month to month, things might change. But invite people to be a part of brainstorming now. The kind of people that you want are not your folks that say, when I have a plan, we will follow it through, right? Like, come hell or high water. No, you want adaptable people that are comfortable with uncertainty, but very creative. And you want whoever it is on your core team, ask those who are in the affinity group of those you are most hoping to connect with when you relaunch. Does that make sense? So if you have some younger teens in your church, and you ask one to be a part of the relaunch team to figure out, how do we advertise our relaunch on TikTok? Help me out. Like, my 11-year-old would love to be a part of that conversation, right? The ideas might not be spectacular, but then you have that buy-in and that ownership, and you might have more young adults showing up. So make sure that those you invite reflect who you're hoping to reach moving forward. And the questions that you want to begin discussing with them right now, just so you're thinking innovatively about it, are, when will we gather? What's our timeline? Looking at your state, your city, medical and Episcopal recommendations for that. Wisconsin has the Wisconsin Council of Churches has a United Methodist that compiled a list with phases and stages of what they're recommending all Wisconsin churches do. It's fantabulous. I'll try to post it here in the chat section to really, and they consulted people statewide about what best practices would be for them. But start thinking about that and then ask, where will we gather? Where are we going to go back to the sanctuary? Some people are already saying, isn't it ironic that maybe our goal is to have new services now? So if you had one 11 o'clock service, maybe now you're doing an 8, a 9:30, and an 11, so that you only have 30 to 40 people in each one, right? The goal was to have a sanctuary that was not full when you went back. You do not want to pack out the house, my friends. So where will you gather? Some people are planning on streaming to their fellowship hall or other classrooms in addition to the sanctuary, so that they can maintain social distancing. So think about that. And also keep in mind, if you're a low tech or no tech church, Or if you're a high-tech church, whatever you're doing now to connect with people, if it's a phone-in service or something live streamed, plan on continuing that indefinitely, but for at least the next year to 18 months. Because again, for your virtual folks that are engaging, or with how things change, you might relaunch and then have to go back to shelter in place orders. And so if you don't stop that online presence or phone-in presence, even when you relaunch, then it provides some stability overall for your congregation. It might look different. Maybe instead of live streaming a 30-minute service the way you're doing now, when you relaunch in the sanctuary, you might just do the sermon online. I mean, that's what I did in my plant starting like 4 or 5 years ago, where I would just sit at my dining room table and do the sermon at 7 p.m. every Sunday night. So if people missed Sunday morning or couldn't attend, they were able to participate. So ask, where are we gathering? Ask, why will we gather? And I think, man, what a blessing it could be for us as pastors to turn to people in our church and say, what is it that we need to celebrate this next year? Or what is it that we're grieving? Like All Saints Day, there are churches already now saying, well, the pastor I talked to in New Jersey, right? There's someone in his church who lost 5 friends and family members this last week alone. So they're looking at All Saints Day very differently, as a big memorial service for anyone and everyone that we've lost. They're also looking at, as a church, maybe having an online webpage or a Facebook group where you can post the obituaries of everyone that you're missing, so that without being able to gather for large funerals or being able to name the grief, people are turning to faith communities to say, help me tell this story. You know, I'm broken and I need to know I'm not alone in this. And so how can you offer a ministry of presence? Or there are some churches that do a blue Christmas every year around Advent for those that might not be super excited or celebrating in the same way that others are. I would recommend that every church consider what a blue Christmas service would look like in your community. For those who are grieving, loss of life, loss of livelihood, or loss of a way of life as they've known it. So start to think strategically now about what you want to do when it comes to worship throughout the fall, because here's another gift for all of us. No one has a bulletin, so they don't know the order of worship, and they might give you a little more grace if, in month 3 of doing an online service, you're not doing the call to worship and the doxology and everything the same order it has been. So there are some amazing pastors. There's one out at Sycamore Creek Church in Michigan, Tom Arthur, who is turning his Sunday services sometimes into like a radio interview. So it feels more like a podcast on Sunday. So play around and innovate. Michael Beck at Wildwood Church, one of our big Fresh Expressions leaders, is doing living room church on Sundays, where he puts people in small groups to talk to each other as opposed to watching one big service together. Christian Kuhn at Urban Village Church in Chicago, as he's live streaming, will stop and say, everyone turn to your chat function and talk about the last time you felt afraid or something you're grateful for. And he'll pause while people are communicating and engaging with each other. Or I know you guys offer the Jason Moore webinar. He talks about Menti to do those live interactive polls. So think about how you're going to celebrate and grieve together and name the variety of emotions people are experiencing as you gather in place. I know a rural church pastor here in Tennessee is sending items from the sanctuary to all of the members of her older church, maybe not heavy things, but maybe like a hymnal, but not necessarily the cross from the altar, or a bulletin or an offering envelope, and saying, when we come back, bring these items with you and let's rebuild the sanctuary together. So how can you help people connect with their faith community? So when, where, why will we gather? And then how will we gather? Look through all of your hospitality stuff. Some churches already are saying, we won't offer coffee and bagels on Sunday morning because we don't want to risk gathering people closely and sharing food and that kind of contact. So how will you do that? Kids ministry, there are lots of questions now. Some churches are saying we might not do Sunday school rooms where kids are all gathering together in tight spaces, but maybe we'll implement a playground space into the sanctuary. So not playground, where you have age-appropriate toys for kids of different ages. And then the parents can supervise and are responsible then for the social distancing regulations. And then they share how they're cleaning all the toys or that environment every week. So use this as a way to reevaluate how are we going to do church differently when we get back together. Talk about that regularly, update it, share it in Google Docs. So it's a living document that will guide you moving forward. Any other questions about section 2? I just have one more. I have no idea what time it is, but I could talk all day, guys. I love this. I won't, because Michael will cut me off, but that's good. Okay.
This is great. This is great. Put in the chat box if you've got questions or questions right now. Fire away, folks, before Rachel goes into section 3. Anything about planning relaunch? And we are going to try and make this PowerPoint available for you to kind of follow up on. And this recording, you can always watch again or share with your leadership. Some people have been chatting about that because, you know, Rachel talks a mile a minute. So that's awesome.
I do.
No, keep going. You're awesome.
Punches. So one other thing that came to mind in terms of like where and how you gather when you relaunch is some churches are already saying, listen, if it's going to be sometime in the summer or late fall, instead of all gathering at the church, we'll ask people to gather in every park or beach or, you know, whatever public space in the community where you're outside so you can practice social distancing. And we'll all gather there together and at the same time sing the same hymn. And then we have leaders in each of those places that will read a prayer or a meditation. And, you know, some churches are incorporating, like in Jewish tradition, you'll put a rock on the gravestone to show that you remember and celebrate and honor the life that was lost. So everyone can kind of lay a rock together and kind of build an altar of remembrance on their first Sunday back. Others are planning really big picnics, parties, because they want to celebrate the fact that the church is able to gather again, but again in neighborhoods. So they're planning on having like 25 of their leaders each invite 7 to 10 people over to their home so that everyone can live stream together, but then have a massive backyard barbecue. So it does feel celebratory and exciting, but it's done in phases. Okay. Any other questions? So there is a question that came in. Oh yeah, Mountain Sky Portal. Yes, keep sharing thoughts. I love that idea. Talk and innovate because you guys know each other's context better than anyone else. So that's amazing.
Good, keep going.
Okay, section 3, our final section is on marketing and messaging. Right? We're all stressed. We're sick of trying to like think through all of this stuff and what our digital presence looks like. But we're stuck at home, we might as well do it because these online guests that are coming to check you out, if they go to your website, and I think Kim Griffith mentions this on that relaunch video, if you show it with your leadership team, that when she goes to a website and it's, you know, almost May, if their last article was posted in December, you're not going to go to any online offerings they have because they just seem dated. So this is where I love to reach out to, I'll use Facebook to say, okay, who has someone in their family age 16 to 21 that could fill out this simple survey. I can share one with Michael, where you have like millennials and Gen Z evaluating your Facebook page, Instagram, if you have one, your website, to see how dated it looks. And literally just ask them one question. What do you think the average age is of someone that goes here? And see what they say. And if it reflects the age of your congregation and that's healthy and growing and vibrant, then good for you because you know how to reach your audience, right? But if you're trying to reach some demographic that is not resonating with your message online, use this as a season to change that, right? Update it, making it more image-driven, less content-driven, and being mindful of the fact that the vast, vast majority of people who look for you online will look from their phones. So don't look on your laptop to evaluate your website. Have your leadership team all go to their phones and pull up the website there to see how easy it is to navigate. And if you need more than 3 clicks to get to the information they're looking for, you've lost them. So, so just rethink that right now. Use this as a time to compile why videos from your current members that they record at home. Everyone can just set up an iPhone and have different questions that they can answer. You know, why at the gathering, when it came time for stewardship seasons, right? Because a lot of us didn't get the Easter offering that we were expecting. So maybe you do a campaign, a summer campaign where we want to really fund missions or kids ministry or outreach for the year. So every Sunday before or after your live stream service, you have a why video. Why do I give to FUMC? Why do I give to After Hours? And where folks share from their heart, and you can compile that. Have people send the videos in mass now and then file them under different categories. Why do I do outreach? Why do I go to a small group? What difference has it made in my life? Stories of transformation will resonate with people more now than ever before, and it will sound stronger and more authentic I'm sorry, I'm just naming a reality, if it comes from laity and not the pastor, because they know you love your church. They know it already. It's your, like, you know, your life. But hearing, I mean, I think at my church one Sunday I had a Navy SEAL stand up and talk about how small groups had changed his life. And he got like a little choked up. And let me tell you, like, the number of men involved in small groups that signed up that next week, like, doubled. So because there was credibility, it wasn't just me saying this is good for you. They heard from others in the church that this has changed my life. So kids ministry, whatever it is that you want to push or celebrate, you know, for Pentecost, 2 years ago, we did a Why I Love My Church and just shared like 50, 60 examples from people, compiled it all together with fun graphics and music. So consider doing something like that right now, just to have those resources. So when you open back up, people won't want to go back to their phones and record videos when they're allowed to gather in person. So take advantage. And then try something new, okay? Hashtags. Do you guys know and love and embrace hashtags? So I have some friends that work at the Christian Broadcasting Network in marketing, and I'm like, help me out. So your sweet spot for hashtags on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, whatever it is that you're using, you want it between 100,000 and 500,000 folks that are times that it's been used. So for instance, if you do hashtag faith, I think it's like 34 million. So anyone looking for faith will look at that. So that's great. But if you want to engage and meet new people, because see, for me, I use online digital discipleship as a way to get people to go deeper in this faith community. So if you want people to know what you're about and to love and connect to that, you want hashtags that are in that 100 to 500. So like United Methodist Church, UMC, I think is one of those. It's like 340. So that's a safe one. So people looking for a UMC will find you more quickly if you use that hashtag as opposed to hashtag Jesus. Okay. So play around with that. Instagram has a great dictionary where you can just type in the word and it will tell you if you're in that sweet spot or not. If it's over 50,000, it's good. If it's under 50,000, just don't use it. No one will find you. Okay. And yes, I completely agree. Hashtags are great to collect people in Twitter and Instagram. There's an a cappella app that people are using to try new things. So again, it's very cheap. I think it's free for a few months, where you can create your own virtual choirs or bands to improve your live streaming. Up to 8 or 9 people can participate. So like one records it, then they send it to the next via the app. And it's just fun. And so if you have someone engaged online who sings and you say, hey, download the a cappella app and you can join our choir next week, oh my gosh, that person will stay connected to you forever, okay? So think through that. Or there's a planter in Minnesota, Tyler, who had all of his church for Easter dance to this particular song, and he gave them different dances to do. And then they paid someone who was struggling financially, you know, who's in the video production field, to put it together for them. So it was affordable, but it was so much fun, and it was so easy to share that on social media. There's a planter in South Carolina who's doing TikTok challenges with her youth, where they'll like, you know, pass a Bible to each other virtually, and then they'll put that on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook as a reminder that youth group is gathering that night. So that's just a fun way, not just for youth, but you could use TikTok for all kinds of things that are entertaining during the season. And Instagram challenges are fun too. There are some churches that have been doing, you know, connected with Easter. Where are you seeing signs of life or hope or transformation? Use this hashtag and share your photos with us. So as people are going about their day-to-day life, they can engage in that together. Or another pastor who's doing a sermon series on healing spaces and how you can find healing in every room of your home, is having people take pictures of that room and share it in preparation for Sunday worship. And it makes it easier to invite people in. You can do this. The sky's the limit. There's no wrong way to attempt to innovate right now, because people will forget very quickly if you mess up, which you won't, because you're in Mountain Sky and you guys rock and we love you. Okay, any questions?
What are your questions? All right, while you're thinking of your question and your comment, one thing I want to say, I'll say 2 things. First is the sort of, this is a historical time, and we're always in moments like this. So 2 months ago, if I would have talked to you about TikTok, you'd be like, tic-tac-toe, what? You know, but right now, in terms of the historical context, that means something for people. And the truth is, A year from now, TikTok may not be the thing, right? But find what is that thing that is engaging people and find a way to create space in there. And this is my pet peeve, folks, as I'm visiting churches, and it's not just Mountain Sky, the power of why. And every time I visit a church can give me 17 different ways to give, but they never tell me why I should, or never invite me to do it, or tell me a story that inspires me. They're like, oh, here's 17 ways to give to our church. Fantastic. Why should I? No one addresses that for me when I'm visiting churches. So this idea of, compiling why videos, not just for stewardship, but for all sorts of ways, right? Great resource, great messaging, great marketing. Thanks, Rachel. This is awesome.
Sure. And you're right, the why is crucial. It's going to be even more crucial as we move into the coming weeks and months, where people are really wondering, why are we experiencing this? When will it all end? And so, I went to Duke, so they train us to be lectionary babies and live and breathe by the lectionary. And that can be very life-giving when I'm stressed and don't want to have to think about an innovative sermon series or text. But I'm putting together an article now with some ideas about worship and sermon series that pastors and planters are creating. There's one planter who did one on the church and Netflix and looked at the spiritual journey of villains. And like 1,000 people are now live streaming every week and way into it because they want to know who's the villain, Carol Baskin or Joe Exotic on Tiger King, right? So if you can help make worship relevant to the everyday life, that can just be so powerful to people right now. You guys are God's gift and the light in the middle of these uncertain and anxious times. And really this is horrible. It's a pandemic. It's a tragedy. But I think of, the story of Joseph, who was like imprisoned, and how what Satan meant for evil, God used for good. And I think this could be used for good in a lot of our churches, because while I was a church planter, my husband's an elder in the Virginia Conference, and he was at the oldest church in our district where Francis Asbury preached in the 1700s. And this is a church that was not big into doing anything Wi-Fi or high tech, and they've had to fully embrace it, right? So all of those folks who are more resistant to change and doing it differently, God has kind of said, well, guess what? This is our reality. So we have no choice but to embrace this or adapt in some way. So continue to live into that spirit, knowing that that curve of innovation means that you need about 17% of people on board to start to enact deep and abiding change in your community. So that's your goal. That's not hard, right? 17%, we can do that.
Good. Thanks, Rachel. I want to give you one final word, and if you'd close this in a word of prayer. But before we do that, again, Rachel, also let us know, a good website, good way to follow you, stay in contact, and some of these resources, and we'll make sure we publish those. Just wanted to give a shout out. Thanks for everybody for being on this Zoom time. Next week, we're going to be quick commercial talking with some of our leaders from our disaster response team here in the Mountain Sky. Also, throughout the month of May, we are talking through transitions, not just pastoral transitions, but transitions in general, post-COVID-19 with Reverend Bob Kaler. We're going to be meeting with Tom Barlow and Tom Wolf. Tom Wolf's the president of the ILEF Seminary, about some cool things. I mean, there's a bunch of cool stuff planned for May that we want you to continue to tune in for. So that's my just quick thank you for tuning in and commercial for the next couple weeks. Rachel, let us know how we can continue to get some of these resources. Give us a final word and close us with prayer.
Sure. I'll jump in and answer those last 3 questions that have come through quickly, just because I'd hate to leave anything unanswered. So paradigm shift to, yes, I think our whole denomination, paradigm shifts are really great and holy to figure out what we're doing and why, and if it's still working or not. So Path 1 has a resource called New People in New Places that goes through the steps of guesting, like how do we listen to our community, how do we gather people together, and then how do we grow in discipleship, that we've done in person throughout the connection, that was just created like 6 months ago, but we could do virtually for members of your church, lay teams or district-wide or whatever, if it's helpful to you, that really emphasizes the virtual aspect of our reality. So it's kind of a Wesleyan lens to see fresh expressions. that we consulted with Fresh Expressions as we created it. But that might help with the paradigm shift, because it is radically different from anything that we've experienced. There's been a Methodist pastor in my family since 1812, so over, hundreds of years. So I get it. Like, this was new for me, but I was appointed to plant a church, so I had to learn pretty quickly, or not get ordained. So anyways, it was good. It was holy. It was great. The other question, the best way to invite people to become computer literate, I would say it really just depends on your context. I mean, if the majority of your church doesn't own a computer or doesn't have Wi-Fi, then there's a really great article that came out today from Fresh Expressions about low-tech, no-tech churches. Discipleship Ministries, my colleague Brian Tinner and Scott Hughes came out with another really great one that lists specific resources for conference calling on phones, how to do an analog church in this era. That should be up in the next day or two. I'll send the link to Michael when it's live. But what I've found is doing a Zoom call where you share your screen and you record like what you're clicking on, or do pictures of what they push, or how to do Zoom, can be really helpful. I mean, my grandmother turned 93 last week, and she joins us for Zoom calls every week because it's a way to see her great grandkids, right? And so it's step by step, and we call her and have her pull out the piece of paper and we walk through it together. But she has so much joy when she's able to see her great grandkids. So think through that as well. And and then the mention about Jason Moore, absolutely. He's a great friend. And the book that he came up, just published with Roz, From Franchise to Local Dive, talks about the same thing, how to adapt these principles for your specific context. Okay, so I'll share all these resources with Michael, the PowerPoint, anything else. But thank you guys for your time. All right, let me close this in prayer, and then you can get back to your busy work of pastoring, and I don't know, hang out with my kids, right? That's the beauty of this season. They haven't interrupted me, so I need to spoil them a little bit. They've been
Awesome.
very good.
Thanks, Rachel.
Right, let us pray. God, we give you thanks that you are a God who is truly with us. So as we lean into your identity as Emmanuel, may we be reminded that we are called to be this continuation of the incarnation, your presence in our community, wherever that is, if it's virtual or physical, if it's in a sanctuary or from our living room. God, just help people to experience your peace and your comfort, your power, your grace, your all-inclusive love for each and every single one of us, and help us to learn innovative ways to share that with others. God, I know that I had no idea what TikTok was a few weeks ago, that I'd never even sent a text until I started ministry with young adults. But with you, all things are possible. So help us not be afraid to try to live into your kingdom, a kingdom that includes everyone and is always longing for new connections. So be with these incredible pastors and laity, Father. Give them wisdom and strength and encouragement now and in the days ahead. We ask all of these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a
Rachel.
great day.
Thank you.
Grace and peace to you.